Welcome guys, I'm Gio here, hope you're having a great day, and in this video we will implement map function with recursion. Well, before we get into the details, the first question is why recursion is important. There are certain types of problems that are easier to solve with recursion. And when we think about the recursion, usually we think about the current step of solution with current inputs, and we decide what to do with these inputs and then pass in the next set of inputs to itself, to the same function. So in the end, we obtain final result. We're not going to get into some theory. We will just try to implement map function with recursion and see a couple of key points related to recursions. So we have some test array here. It is usually the list of games, and then we have a mapping function that will transform string into uppercase. Now let's start writing our map function. It needs to take in at least two things. First is the list that we want to transform, and the second is mapping function that will transform each element into something else. So let's write that. We also need two additional things here, two additional parameters. One is the array that will accumulate our final result, and that it will contain the transformed array. And also we need some indication of current step that our recursive function should operate on. So let's add them. These two are not for users. Users will just pass in list and map function. This is how it would look for users. Just array and mapping function. These two are for internal use only. Let's move on to interesting part and actually implement this function. Well, first thing about the recursion that we should remember is that it needs to have some base case. Recursive function calls itself, but at some point it should stop, otherwise we obtain no result. When all elements are transformed, we haven't implemented this part yet. Let's think about in terms of current step. So when this happens and index is equal to length of our array, it means that there are no more items left to process. So this indicates that our solution has come to an end, and whatever was accumulated in result will be just returned. So this is our base case. This will terminate our function. Now let's move on to the other part, when that's not the case and current index, current item exists in the list. Well, what should we do in this case? It's very easy. We need to add new element into our resulting array, and this element should be transformed by map function. So if this is not the base case, then we take the current element from our list with given index. We are transforming it with whatever function user has passed, and we are adding our result into our final resulting array with push. Once we have done that, we need to move recursion forward, so we have to call map function and move the process forward. So let's do it. Let's explain this final part here. After we are done with the current step, then we call map function again, but we are passing the same list, same mapping function, resulting array, which now contains our current element processed, and we are moving recursion forward by passing the next index. So let's just test it. As you see, it is working. All the strings in the list are turned into uppercase, and we have achieved result. Now let's go through everything all over again and analyze every part. So initially, user calls our map function and only passes this first two arguments. In this case, we have array and two upper functions that just makes the strings uppercase. So this is what user does. Now, since nothing is passed here, initially we default to empty array, which will be final result, which will be a base for our final result, and we are operating on a first element, so we have index equal to 0. From now on, our function kicks in and recursion starts working. First we check that current element exists, and if it is not, then we have reached the end, and we will return whatever was accumulated before. We call our function no further. If it's not the case, then it means that current item needs to be processed, so we take current item from the list, and initially it will be first element, and then we are applying map function to transform this item, and then we are pushing it to our resulting array. This is what the current step is. Once we are done with current step, we need to move recursion forward, so we are calling map function again. List is same, map function is same, result is same, but it already contains currently processed item. And the key thing here is that we are passing the next index. So whatever was before plus 1. Initially it will be 0, then 1, 2, and so on. And in the end we'll return the final result. A good thing about the recursion is that when we write recursive function, we think in terms of current step and how to handle current step with given inputs. And once we are done with that, then we can move recursion forward by calling the function again, just with different parameters. We'll cover recursion in a lot more detail in the future, but that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Click the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends.